Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 9th of September 2011. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that is mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Hard Reset. This is the full press version. It's coming out next week on Tuesday, if I recall correctly. There was a demo available on Steam if you want to check it out. Still enjoying it quite a lot. I think it's certainly got a few issues, particularly the fact that it's checkpoint based, not really a big fan of that. Switching between specific weapons can be a bit of a pain in the ass as well, because you've got these two weapons that have 5 modes, so generally speaking it's 2 button presses to get to the weapon that you want, not 1, unless I'm missing something obvious. It's a bit of a pain. Whatever the case, it's a pretty good game. It's got some flaws, but, well, so does anything, and since it's only about $30, it's this kind of cool mid-range shooter. It's one worth keeping your eye on. Anyway, this first email comes in from Safaro that says, with the recent launch of Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine, I've been really excited about jumping into the multiplayer. However, I cannot enjoy it due to the peer-to-peer system they have. Being an Australian, the peer-to-peer system links me up with other people around the world. Usually I don't mind that, but for a fast-paced action game, ping is very important, and it ruins the experience for me. I've encountered many problems with the peer-to-peer system before, such as bad hosts, and I'm sure a lot of PC gamers prefer dedicated servers over the peer-to-peer system. I can understand the reason for it being used on consoles, but my question is, why do some PC developers or PC ports choose to retain the peer-to-peer system over dedicated servers? Well, it's about 2 things. 1, it's about control, and 2, it's about laziness. When it comes down to control, the idea of having dedicated servers often also allows people to tinker with the game in ways that perhaps the developer doesn't want. And that could be a bit of a problem for some devs. They're not a big fan of it, so they prevent you from doing so. Most of the time, however, it comes down to sheer laziness, and it's a case of just not removing the system and redesigning it. Having a dedicated server system, I imagine, takes a little bit of work, as opposed to just retaining the peer-to-peer system from the consoles. And it is really disappointing, because Relic managed a really, really good PC version for Space Marine. Controls, really good, fully rebindable, lots of graphics options, fast loading times, runs very well on pretty much any machine, doesn't crash, very reliable. That's all cool. And then you get to the multiplayer, and then you realize, well, not only do they have the peer-to-peer system, they've also got the mic system from consoles, whereby people's mics are stuck permanently on unless you mute them, and you can only mute them if they actually speak in the lobby screen. If they speak inside the game and they haven't spoke before, say, like, for instance, the mic didn't trigger because it didn't go past the volume threshold or whatever, and then they start blurting out random crap in the middle of the game, there's nothing you can do about it. It's awful. It's really, really bad. It's not even, that's actually the worst problem I've got with it. I don't even care so much about the peer-to-peer, even though I can definitely understand why you wouldn't like it. Because, of course, you are Australian, and in that respect, you really need to try and get some people together from Australia, maybe start a community, for instance, for Space Marine players, and just play with the sort of private lobby system. Now, I don't know if that stops you from getting experience. I assume it doesn't, because that would be incredibly dumb. But aside from that, queue it with your friends and sort it out that way. But the permanently on voice thing is awful. It's happened in a couple of ports, particularly Borderlands, for instance. This is even worse, though, because it's 8-on-8 teams as opposed to 4-player co-op. And you can get all sorts of horrible echo back and things like that. And it's designed for consoles in mind, where they've got headsets that plug in, and that's fine. But in this case, it just, any microphone you have on your machine, it'll just trigger. And it causes all sorts of horrible problems. It makes the game really annoying to play. It's infuriating. And it is just down to sheer, complete and total laziness, and I'm definitely not happy with Relic in that regard. I'm really disappointed by that, because the demo, and of course the single player, great, brilliant, works fine, really great PC version, multiplayer, peer-to-peer, and permanent mics on. Wonderful. Or more accurately, freaking awful. I don't know, I mean, the multiplayer to me does feel very phoned in places, if I'm totally honest. It is good, and some people will disagree with me when I say that it's a bit phoned in, but there isn't a huge amount of innovation in the multiplayer at all, and I suppose some people don't really mind, but it does seem like the majority of the time was spent on the single player, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but the multiplayer doesn't really stand up on its own, and it certainly wouldn't stand up if it wasn't attached to the license. I'll be bringing you a full WTF is of the multiplayer at some point in the not-too-distant future, most likely after the weekend, once the tournament is done. This one comes in from James that says, one of the things I've always wanted was Xbox gamers to be able to play with PC and PS3 players. I only want to know 2 things. First, do you know how that would be possible? And also, do you think it will ever happen? I know that for that there would have to be some kind of deal between the platform servers, which to me seems unlikely. It may be a dumb question, but one I want answered in your epic voice nonetheless. Please don't do this. Please. It really is... Ugh. It's always disturbing to hear stuff like that. Just ask a straight-up question, and you'll get a straight-up answer. Anyway, point. So, my thoughts on the matter, well, it's already happened, actually. It happened with Shadowrun. Specifically, it was a 360 and PC joint thing, and a part of the early launch of games for Windows, which didn't really go all that well. And the system they had there was you could play with 360 players on the PC, and vice versa. The 360 guys got a bit of auto-aim to compensate for the fact that the PC guys had keyboard and mouse. The problem is you can never truly balance it, and therein lies a fairly severe problem in terms of having players who are under-equipped on, say, a console. For instance, you put console gamers for Call of Duty against PC gamers. The PC gamers should, in theory, win, and if they don't, they're probably doing something very wrong indeed, because accuracy is always going to be better with a mouse and keyboard, assuming you know what you're actually doing. The mouse is a very powerful tool. You would have to have some kind of auto-aim to compensate for the lack of accuracy in a 360 or PS3 analog stick, for instance. And I don't know if that's really worth having. I think it could cause all sorts of horrible arguments. Maybe they could have it in such a way that you could only play unranked. You know, maybe stats weren't recorded for it or something, and maybe people wouldn't get as mad then. And just see huge arguments breaking out. It's like, you only beat me because you're on a PC with a keyboard and mouse and nonsense like that. It is irritating. I would like to see a little bit more cross-platform pollination. I don't see a huge reason to segregate consoles from PC in certain games. There's an issue with, say, Street Fighter, for instance. The console version of Street Fighter is used in competitive tournaments, not the PC version. Why? Usually because it's about frame rates. When it comes down to consoles, a console will run the game at exactly the same frame rate as the other guy's console. You put that cross-platform with a PC, and things start to get a little bit crazy. Once again, perhaps they could just do an unranked version that would allow you to do that. Because that's the kind of game where it's very much platform neutral, because controllers are available for all of those systems that would put the players on an even footing. I can use an arcade stick with a 360, a PC, or a PS3. Hell, you can even use a keyboard with a PS3 in some instances, if you so desire. Good luck doing it with a 360 without some kind of crazy add-on. But PS3 is actually fairly open in that regard. You can plug an awful lot of different peripherals into that, and it'll pretty much work. Most controllers, aside from a 360 controller, will work in a PS3 by default. I was using a Saturn controller in a PS3 with a USB attachment. It does work, there's no real doubt about that. So there are some games that are very much neutral that would work pretty well there, but the problem is the main competitive online games, things like first-person shooters, strategy games, those just simply aren't going to work cross-platform. There's too much of a gap between the two platforms. I say two platforms as PC and console as opposed to just PC, 360, PS3. And it's based entirely on peripherals, and as a direct result, you're probably not going to get much of that. But there are certainly some games I would like to see some cross-compatibility on. Maybe we could see some indie games doing it, but I have to imagine that it's complicated and expensive. So I would imagine most indie developers just aren't doing it because of cost. Shame, but there you go. This one comes in from an anonymous viewer that says, in an earlier mailbox, you mentioned how Capcom is not very smart, to put it nicely, with their Monster Hunter franchise, in that they refuse to release in the Western world, or when they do, it's released on an underused platform such as the Wii or the PSP. Now I've seen on IGN that the next Monster Hunter title will be on the 3DS. This does not bode well for them, as I'm sure the 3DS version will be very lacking in comparison to the PS3, PC, PSP, or possibly even the Wii version. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter and whether you can think of any reason why Capcom is doing what it's doing with the Monster Hunter franchise. Well, let's correct a few things. Firstly, no, it will look as good as a PSP. Have you actually used the 3DS? Those things are actually quite meaty. They have quite a lot of power behind them, particularly when you have 3D mode off. I think, if anything, the 3D is holding a lot of developers back because they have to develop with the 3D mode. I don't think it's actually possible to make a game without 3D support on the 3DS. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do it. I've certainly never seen it, but then again, I don't know. Maybe there's a way around it. the 3D knocks the frame rate down to pretty much half. Like, for instance, I've got Dead or Alive Dimensions. It runs at a smooth 60 frames per second on the 3DS, and it looks really, really good. It looks almost as good as the 360 version of Dead or Alive 4, only the backgrounds tend to lack detail and are usually quite static. Aside from that, it looks really, really good. Same example given with Super Street Fighter 4. Once again, static backgrounds, but otherwise pretty much looks as good as it would on a console. However, as soon as you engage 3D mode, the frame rate tends to cut in half, and that's a bit of a problem. I don't like playing fighting games at 30 FPS. They don't feel fluid enough. As a direct result, I don't use the 3D mode in fighting games. I'll occasionally use it on something like Star Fox, which came out today. The 3D works pretty well in that, and it's a good game for it. Anything that involves flying through hoops and that kind of perspective, yeah, works pretty well. Racing games work really well in 3D. But anyway, that's beside the point. The 3DS is a really powerful piece of kit. It's a good, powerful handheld. I would say that it has the capabilities of a PSP. From what I've seen from the launch titles, I think there's a lot more power under the hood that could be utilized. It's just a shame that it's getting sunk into 3D, which a lot of people don't care about. It is, however, another great example of Capcom fumbling on the Western side of things. And Monster Hunter is a dumb thing to have in the West on a portable platformer. It's as simple as that. Why? It's a really easy concept. Guys in the West don't use portable devices in the same way that guys in Japan do. Japan, you do get a lot of people carrying portable devices around and congregating. Monster Hunter cafes, as I've said before, these places do exist. People bring their handhelds there to do that, and they frequently group together to play with handhelds. We really don't do that. When it comes to multiplayer, we either do the whole split screen thing, or more accurately, we just play multiplayer over the internet with people that we can't see. And really, Capcom doesn't seem to have figured that one out yet for the Western market. They really don't. I just don't know what they're doing. Yeah, the 3DS is selling much, much better now, and it's selling really well in Japan. It's the #1 selling console at the moment because of the price cut and the fact that there are actually games coming out that the Japanese are interested in. But Monster Hunter, in my opinion, is not a good game to be portable. Why? It takes so long to do some of the boss fights. Do you really want to be in a really intricate boss fight where you can die in a couple of hits, where you've got to be incredibly focused and concentrated while sitting on a moving train, or a bus, or outside, or playing it in a waiting room, or whatever? I don't. That's the kind of thing where I'd want to be sitting at home in front of a big screen, focused without distractions. To me, portable gaming is stuff that you can do in very small chunks, and the suspend function does not mean that it is suitable for portable play. Certainly for single player, I think Monster Hunter is a terrible game to be portable. And yeah, it's nice that we can take something that complex and that deep around with us. Don't get me wrong, it's cool that it's there as an option, but the fact that the only way of playing Monster Hunter on a console or on anything installed in your home at the moment is with the original on the PS2 in the West is an absolute travesty. Capcom is actually crazy. It's made a lot of very dumb decisions over the past 6 months, and as much as I absolutely adore them as a publisher and a developer, they are really going off the damn rails at this point, and I want them to get some sense into their heads, and they really need consultants in the West to try and tell them how things actually work over here. Okay, folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. It's also me wrapped up for the week. I shall see you Monday with yet more Mailboxy goodness, and I'll be focusing on the Shoutcraft Invitational this weekend that is going on over at twitch.tv/TotalBiscuit, starting at midday in the British Isles, at 7 a.m. on the east coast of the US, and 1 p.m. Central European summertime over on twitch.tv/TotalBiscuit with some great StarCraft action. I'll see you next time.